The day my world fractured, a day etched in the deepest recesses of my memory, began with the deceptive normalcy of any other Tuesday. Work emails pinged with monotonous regularity. Jason offered his usual half-hearted attempts at homework, and the familiar hum of the coffee maker provided a comforting backdrop. There was no ominous foreshadowing, no whisper of the tempest about to descend. Had I known then what lay ahead, perhaps I would have acted differently, though in the cold light of hindsight, I doubt it. Some cataclysms are simply inevitable. I sat in the living room, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the mounting bills when a notification flashed. Your balance is below the minimum threshold. A prickle of unease. The college fund held more than enough. 6 years of meticulous saving for Jason's future. Laura and I had both agreed, a silent pact forged in shared aspiration, that this money was sacrosanct. We hadn't even needed to revisit the conversation, so deeply ingrained was the understanding of its significance, or so I believed. I logged into the account, expecting to see some clerical error, a glitch in the matrix of the digital world. Banks made mistakes all the time, didn't they? But no. The truth slammed into me with the force of a runaway train. The account was empty. Not low, but utterly devastatingly void. Zero. A gaping maw of nothingness. No transactions listed. I stared at the screen, the stark figures burning into my retinas. A desperate hope, a silent prayer, that this was some cruel jest flickered within me. But it wasn't a joke. "Laura!" I called out, my voice a mere tremor. Silence. "Laura!" I repeated, louder this time, but only the oppressive quiet of an empty house answered. She wasn't home. It was then, a glacial tendril of dread snaking around my heart, that the chilling realization began to dawn. Laura had been acting strangely for weeks, a touch distant, a little too meticulously dressed for her errands, deflecting questions about her whereabouts with vague excuses. I had dismissed it as stress, the relentless pressures of life, anything but this. Never, not once, had it crossed my mind. I snatched my phone and dialed her number, straight to voicemail. I tried again, the same disembodied greeting. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a frantic drum against the silence. Jason wandered into the room, munching on an apple, oblivious to the chaos unfurling before me. "Where's Mom?" I asked, striving for a normalcy I no longer felt. He shrugged, taking another bite. Said she had to go somewhere. That innocuous somewhere pierced me like a shard of ice, lodging itself deep within my core. My hands trembled as I pulled up our joint credit card account. Perhaps a morbid curiosity, a perverse need to confirm the burgeoning suspicion propelled me. And there it was. Transaction after transaction, airline tickets, lavish hotels, exquisite restaurants. My wife was on the other side of the country, bleeding dry the very funds earmarked for our son's future. I didn't want Jason to see me unraveling, but the threads of my composure were snapping one by one. My mind raced, a frantic search for answers in a landscape suddenly devoid of meaning. How could she do this? How could she steal from our son, the one innocent soul untouched by our troubles? Yes, we'd had our arguments lately. Yes, things hadn't been perfect, but this was an unforgivable betrayal. Jason must have registered the seismic shift in my demeanor because he approached and placed a small hand on my shoulder. "It's okay, Dad," he said, offering a smile that was unnervingly calm, almost knowing. "I'll fix it." In that moment, I took it for a child's innocent attempt at comfort. Children didn't grasp the weight of betrayal, the profoundness of loss. They saw the world in stark contrasts, good guys and bad guys, problems and solutions. I wanted to believe his words were just that, innocent. But even then, something in his tone felt off, as if he possessed a knowledge that belied his years. I didn't have the energy to press him. My focus was consumed by Laura. I tried calling her again, a futile exercise in hope. It wasn't until later that night, when I checked her closet and saw her suitcase was gone, that the full weight of the truth crashed down upon me. She wasn't coming back. She had emptied our coffers, packed her bags, and walked out on her family, on me, on Jason. Rage surged through me in waves, each more violent than the last. I wasn't just furious at her, I was furious at myself. How could I have missed the signs? How could I have been so blind, so utterly complacent? Every transaction, every lie replayed in my mind, a cruel film I couldn't switch off. Jason remained quiet for most of the evening, watching me with that same unsettlingly placid expression. When he finally went to bed, I was left alone in the darkness, replaying the last few months, desperate to find some semblance of understanding. But there was none. Only a gaping void where trust had once resided, and a betrayal so profound it threatened to swallow me whole. I wish I could say that clarity struck me that night, some resolution to move forward, but it didn't. All I found was the cold, bitter truth. The woman I loved had chosen herself over her family, and there was no going back. What I didn't know, as I sat there drowning in my grief, was that Jason had already begun to work on a solution so audacious, so far beyond the realm of my imagining, that it would soon shatter the remnants of my already fractured reality. The days that followed Laura's betrayal blurred into a hazy nightmare. I barely functioned, existing on autopilot, consumed by a volatile cocktail of anger, confusion, and a gut-wrenching heartbreak. But Jason was unnervingly composed. More than that, he was eerily calm for a 10-year-old boy whose mother had just abandoned him. He still went to school, still did his homework, still played with his Legos as if nothing had fundamentally shifted in our world. At first, I chalked it up to shock. Children process trauma in mysterious ways, didn't they? But the truth, I would soon discover, was far more complex. Jason wasn't ignoring the situation. He was actively working on it. It started subtly. I'd catch him hunched over his tablet, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. He'd glance up, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, before swiftly minimizing the screen, offering a casual, "Just homework, Dad." I didn't think much of it. He'd always been a prodigy with technology, whether it was coding, gaming, or anything in between. It was his domain. But then there were the hushed phone calls. "Who are you talking to?" I asked one evening, finding him in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear. He startled like a deer caught in headlights. "Nobody," he mumbled, shoving the phone into his pocket and hurrying out of the room. I didn't press it. Figured he was talking to a friend, or maybe even the school counselor. Everyone coped with grief differently, I reasoned. Perhaps this was his way. Then came the garage. Jason started spending hours out there, tinkering with tools and wires. Initially, I paid it little mind, assumed he was working on one of his little engineering projects. He'd always been good at building things, robots, model airplanes, that sort of thing. But one night, curiosity gnawed at me. I wandered into the garage to see what he was up to, and what I found stopped me dead in my tracks. There was a whiteboard covered in diagrams, equations, and flowcharts. It looked like something out of a spy movie. A laptop sat nearby, lines of code scrolling across the screen. Jason was hunched over a workbench, soldering what looked suspiciously like a listening device. He jumped when he saw me, trying to shield the board with his small frame. "What is all this?" I asked, genuinely bewildered. "Nothing, Dad. Just a school project," he said too quickly, too defensively. I raised an eyebrow. A school project? Since when did 4th grade involve surveillance equipment? Jason's face flushed crimson, and for a fleeting moment I thought he was about to confess everything. But then he just shrugged and mumbled, "You wouldn't understand anyway," before gathering his tools and heading back inside. I stood there staring at the whiteboard, my head swimming. Whatever Jason was involved in, it wasn't a school project, and it certainly wasn't just a hobby. With each passing day, the strange behavior intensified. Jason started asking oddly specific questions about Laura's finances. Did she have any other accounts? Did I know her passwords? Had she ever mentioned anything about offshore investments? At first, I thought he was just curious, but then I realized he was actively gathering information. "Why do you need to know all this?" I asked one evening. Jason shrugged, his eyes glued to his tablet. "Just wondering." "Jason," I said, my voice firm, "this isn't normal. If something's bothering you, you need to tell me." He finally looked up. His expression was unreadable. "I told you, Dad, I'm fixing things. You'll see." Sleep eluded me that night. Jason's words echoed in my mind. Fixing things. What could he possibly mean? I considered talking to him, demanding answers, but something held me back. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was a small, irrational part of me that trusted him, trusted that he somehow knew what he was doing. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen typing furiously on his laptop. He didn't even notice me standing there, watching him. His fingers danced across the keyboard with a proficiency that seemed impossible for a 10-year-old. "Jason," I said softly, and he froze. "Yeah, Dad?" I wanted to ask him what he was doing, what he was planning, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I simply said, "Breakfast is ready," and walked away. Looking back, I know I should have pressed him harder. I should have demanded to know what he was up to, but a part of me didn't want to know. A part of me was terrified of what I might discover. Over the next few days, Jason's behavior grew even more secretive. He stopped leaving his tablet unattended, locked the garage whenever he was working in there, and even started draping a sheet over the whiteboard when it wasn't in use. And just when I was starting to convince myself that it was all harmless, Laura called. It was late evening when my phone rang. I stood at the kitchen sink, staring blankly out the window, still trying to piece together the shattered fragments of my life. Jason was in the living room, engrossed in his tablet as usual, a world away from my turmoil. I glanced at the caller ID and froze. Laura. My first instinct was to ignore it. What was the point? What could she possibly say to justify what she had done? But a morbid curiosity, a perverse need to hear her squirm, compelled me to answer, "What do you want?" My voice was cold, sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. "Alex!" she cried, her voice raw and trembling. "Oh God, Alex, you have to help me!" Help her? The audacity of the request sent a jolt of pure fury through me. "Help you?" I spat. "You emptied our son's college fund and ran off with your boyfriend. Why in God's name would I help you?" "Alex, please just listen to me," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Something's gone wrong." "Everything's gone wrong." I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge to steady myself. "What are you talking about?" "It's Damien," she said, almost sobbing. "He's gone. All his accounts are frozen, and mine too. I can't get to anything, Alex, nothing. And now the police are looking for me." Her words hit me like a physical blow, but there was no sympathy, no flicker of compassion, only a cold, visceral satisfaction. I wanted to ask her how it felt to be abandoned, helpless, left adrift as she had left Jason and me. But I remained silent, letting her dig her own grave. "Alex, please," she continued, her desperation escalating. "I don't know what's happening. I don't know who did this, but I need your help. I'm stuck in Miami with no money, no ID, nothing. Damien said he'd take care of everything, and now he's just gone." "Sounds like a real stand-up guy," I said dryly, unable to resist the jab. She didn't even register the sarcasm, too consumed by her panic. "I swear, Alex, I didn't want things to turn out like this. You just what, Laura?" I roared, my anger finally boiling over. "You just stole from your own son? You just abandoned your family for some lowlife who doesn't give a damn about you? Is that what you didn't want to happen?" There was a long silence on the other end, broken only by the sound of her ragged breathing. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "A mistake?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You don't get to call this a mistake, Laura. You made a choice, a selfish, cruel choice, and now you're paying for it." "Alex, please," she said again, her voice barely audible. "I have nothing. I don't know what to do. I need you." I opened my mouth to reply, but before I could utter a word, Jason appeared in the doorway, his tablet in hand. "Who is it?" he asked casually, as if it were any other day. I covered the receiver and whispered, "It's your mother." Jason's face clouded over for a fleeting moment, but then that same unsettlingly calm, knowing smile flickered across his lips. "Put it on speaker," he said. "Jason, trust me, Dad. Put it on speaker." Something in his tone gave me pause. It wasn't a request. It was an instruction. I didn't understand why, but I obeyed. I hit the speakerphone button and placed the phone on the counter. Laura, I said, my voice hardening. You're on speaker. Jason's here. A sharp intake of breath echoed from the other end. Jason, she said softly, her voice laced with a desperate sweetness. Honey, it's Mommy. Shut up. Jason cut her off, his voice cold, devoid of any childish warmth. I don't want to hear it. Jason, please, she pleaded. I know I hurt you. I know I made a mistake, but you didn't just make a mistake, he interrupted again, his voice sharp and unforgiving. You betrayed us. You stole my future. And now you're calling us because you need our help? That's pathetic. I stared at him dumbfounded. This wasn't the voice of a 10-year-old boy. It was the voice of someone older, someone wiser, someone darker. Jason, Laura whispered, her voice trembling. I'm your mother. I love you. I didn't mean for... You don't love me, he stated flatly. If you did, you wouldn't have left. You wouldn't have stolen from me. You chose Damien over us. And now you're paying the price. I don't feel sorry for you. You deserve this. Jason, please, she sobbed. I'm begging you, please help me. He smiled. A cold, self-assured smile that sent a shiver down my spine. Don't worry, Mom, he said, his voice almost cheerful. I already have. What? She asked, her voice laced with confusion. Let's just say, he replied, Damien won't be hurting anyone else ever again, and neither will you. The line went dead. I stood there staring at Jason, my mind reeling. What did you do? I whispered. He looked up at me. His gaze was steady, almost proud. I told you, Dad, he said. I fixed it. When Jason uttered those words, I fixed it. A bewildering cocktail of pride, horror, and utter confusion churned within me. My 10-year-old son, standing before me with that unsettling calm, had just silenced his panicked mother with a cryptic pronouncement that left me more bewildered than ever. My mind raced, sifting through possibilities, each more outlandish than the last. What could he have possibly done? He was just a child, wasn't he? Jason, I said, trying to keep my voice level. What do you mean you fixed it? What did you do? He shrugged nonchalantly, as if we were discussing his math homework. Like I said, Dad, Mom and Damien can't hurt us anymore. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. Jason, this isn't a game. You need to tell me everything you did. He sighed, the weary sigh of a parent humoring a child's incessant questions, and gestured for me to follow him into the living room. Okay, fine. I'll show you. We settled on the sofa, and he powered on his tablet. The screen flickered to life, displaying a dizzying array of charts, bank statements, and what looked like lines of complex code. My pulse quickened as he began to explain, his voice calm and methodical, as if he were presenting a science project. Remember how Mom emptied my college fund, he began. Well, I figured if she could take the money, I could get it back. I stared at him, speechless, as he brought up a series of bank transactions. And there it was, the $50,000 Laura had stolen back in the account. Not just back, but reorganized and invested in a way that made my head spin. How? I stammered. Easy, he said, as if hacking into bank accounts was as simple as tying his shoelaces. Mom wasn't very careful with her passwords. I just used the one she saved on her phone to access her accounts. Damien wasn't any smarter. Once I was in, I just transferred the money back where it belonged. That's illegal, Jason, I managed to say, though the conviction in my voice was wafer thin. He shrugged again. So is stealing from your own kid. I couldn't argue with that, but my unease deepened as he continued scrolling through the screen. The bank transfers were just the tip of the iceberg. Jason had done more, much more. Damien had a bunch of accounts in his name, Jason said, pointing to the screen. Turns out he's been scamming people for years. Fake investments, shell companies, the whole 9 yards. I reported it all to the authorities, gave them all the proof they needed to put him away for a long time. You reported him? I asked in a barely audible whisper. Yep. Even made sure to drop a little breadcrumb trail back to Mom, he added with a smirk that sent a chill down my spine. She was helping him spend the money, so technically she's part of the scam too. The police are keeping an eye on her. Jason, do you understand what you've done? I said, my voice rising. It's not just about getting the money back. You've put your mother in serious trouble. She put herself in serious trouble, he retorted sharply, his tone hardening. She chose Damien over us. She chose herself over us. Why should I feel sorry for her? I didn't know how to answer that. He was right, of course. Laura had betrayed us in the most devastating way. But hearing those words from my son, spoken with such icy detachment, twisted something in my chest. This wasn't just a 10-year-old boy standing up for himself. This was something darker. And Damien? I asked, dreading the answer. What did you mean he won't be hurting anyone else? Jason grinned. Oh, don't worry. He's still around. Just doesn't have any money or anywhere to hide anymore. The authorities froze all his assets. By the time they catch up with him, he'll be penniless and in jail. The casualness with which he said it, as if obliterating a person's life was no more significant than squashing a bug, made me shudder. Jason, I said, choosing my words carefully, why didn't you tell me about this? Why didn't you let me handle it? He looked up at me, his expression softening slightly. Because I knew you wouldn't do anything. You would have just let her get away with it, because you're too nice. Someone had to stop her, Dad. Someone had to protect us. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. My son, my sweet, brilliant boy, had taken it upon himself not just to rectify our situation, but to exact a revenge I couldn't have conceived of in my wildest dreams. I didn't know whether to be proud of his resourcefulness or horrified by what it signified. Jason, I said after a long pause, I'm not sure this is the right way to handle things. He tilted his head, his calm demeanor unwavering. Maybe not, but it worked. I leaned back on the sofa, running a hand through my hair. I didn't know what to say, what to feel. My son had done what I couldn't. He had taken control of a hopeless situation and turned it on its head. But at what cost? Jason closed his tablet and looked at me with that same unsettling certainty. Don't worry, Dad, he said. Everything's going to be okay now. But sitting there, looking at him, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was far from okay. Sleep remained a distant luxury after Jason's revelations. How could it not? The sheer audacity of what he had done replayed in my mind, a broken record of disbelief and a growing unease. My son, a mere 10 years old, had orchestrated a scheme so intricate, so devastating, that it had left two adults utterly ruined. And the most chilling part, he seemed to harbor not a single shred of remorse. I told myself I would address it in the morning, but life, as it often does, had other plans. The phone rang again. Laura. My first instinct was to let it go to voicemail. After all, what more could she possibly say that would make any difference? But a small masochistic part of me wanted to hear her squirm, so I answered. What? I snapped, dispensing with any semblance of civility. Alex, please, she sobbed. You have to help me. I'm begging you. The sound of her voice was almost unrecognizable. Gone was the self-assured woman who had walked out on our lives without a backward glance. In her place was someone desperate, broken. The nerve of you calling me, I said coldly. Alex, listen to me, she pleaded, the words tumbling out in a frantic rush. The police are looking for me. They've frozen all my accounts. Damien's gone, just vanished. I don't even know where he is. Alex, I'm stranded. I have no money, nowhere to go. And whose fault is that? I cut in, my voice rising. Alex, please, she cried. I know, okay? I know I messed up. I know I hurt you and Jason, but I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to be left with nothing. I let out a bitter laugh. You emptied our son's college fund, ran off with your boyfriend, and now you're crying because the consequences have caught up to you. You deserve this, Laura. Every single bit of it. Silence hung heavy on the other end, broken only by her ragged breathing. I didn't think things would go this far, she whispered. You didn't think at all, I roared. You were too busy living it up with Damien to think about what you were leaving behind. Well, guess what, Laura? You made your bed, now lie in it. She broke down then, a raw, unrestrained sob tearing through the silence. Alex, I'm begging you, please help me get out of this mess. I have no one else to turn to. My jaw clenched. No one else to turn to? The sheer audacity of the statement sent my blood boiling. After everything she had done, she had the gall to play the victim as if I owed her something. There's nothing I can do for you, I said flatly. Don't say that, she pleaded. You can talk to the police, tell them it was all Damien. Yeah, because lying to cover your tracks worked out so well the first time, I interrupted. No, Laura, I'm done cleaning up your messes. Alex, please, she screamed, her voice cracking. If not for me, then for Jason. Do it for him. That was the last straw. Don't you dare bring Jason into this, I said, my voice dangerously low. You don't get to play the concerned mother now, not after what you did to him. You made your priorities crystal clear, and they weren't with your family. Alex, I'm sorry, she wailed. I didn't want things to end up like this. I just wanted to be happy. Happy? I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. You think stealing from your own son and running off with some loser was going to make you happy? Well, congratulations, Laura. You got what you wanted. Now deal with the fallout. Another long silence stretched between us, and for a moment I thought she had hung up. But then she spoke again, her voice small and broken. Is that it then? She asked. You're just going to leave me like this? The sheer irony of her words almost made me laugh. You left us first, I said simply. And no, Laura, I'm not leaving you. I'm just letting you face the consequences of your own damn actions. Goodbye. I hung up before she could say another word. When I turned around, Jason was standing in the doorway, watching me with that same calm, calculating expression. You didn't go easy on her, did you? He asked. No, I said, my voice heavy with exhaustion. I didn't. He nodded as if that were the only acceptable answer. Good. She doesn't deserve our help. I wanted to tell him that it wasn't that simple, that as much as I hated Laura for what she had done, a part of me still wrestled with the idea of leaving her to the wolves. But looking at Jason, at the steely resolve in his eyes, I knew he wouldn't understand. Or maybe he would. And that thought scared me even more. Jason, I said carefully, what you did, what you're doing, it's not normal. A 10-year-old shouldn't have to think like this. I'm not a normal 10-year-old, he stated flatly. I had no response to that. If I had learned anything, it was that people like Damien didn't go down quietly when cornered. They lashed out, they roared, they tried to drag as many people down with them as possible. And that's exactly what happened next. It started with a phone call, but not from Laura. No, I had blocked her number. This call came from an unknown one. Against my better judgment, I answered, thinking maybe the authorities had finally caught up with Damien. Alex, a voice snarled on the other end, low, dangerous, and dripping with venom. You think you're so smart, huh? I froze. Damien? I said, keeping my voice even. Shouldn't you be in hiding right now? He let out a humorless laugh. Oh, I'm hiding all right, thanks to you and your little brat. You think you can ruin my life and just walk away. I glanced into the living room where Jason was calmly assembling a model car, sitting on the floor as if nothing in the world could touch him. For a fleeting moment, I considered denying everything, playing dumb. But what was the point? Damien already knew. You got what you deserved, I said, trying to keep my tone steady. You stole from my family. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? You don't know who you're dealing with, he roared. You think this is over? It's not over. It's far from over. What are you going to do, Damien? I asked, my patience wearing thin. You're broke. You're wanted by the police. You're finished. Maybe, he said, his voice chillingly calm. But I'm not going down alone. I know where you live, Alex. I know what school your little punk goes to. And if you think I'm just going to sit back and let you destroy me, you've got another thing coming. A cold dread washed over me. He wasn't bluffing. Damien was many things. A liar, a thief, a coward. But he wasn't the type to make empty threats. Stay away from my son, I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. Or what? He sneered. You gonna sick your little hacker on me again? Let's see how far he's willing to go. I hung up before he could say anything else. My hands were shaking as I placed the phone back on the counter. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at it, trying to process what had just happened. Who was it? Jason asked, his voice remarkably steady. Damien, I said, turning to face him. He knows what you did, and now he's threatening us. Jason didn't even flinch. Let him try, he said, his tone so cold it sent a shiver down my spine. Jason, this isn't a game, I said, kneeling down in front of him. This man is dangerous. We need to call the police. No, Jason cut me off, his voice firm. The police won't do anything until it's too late, but I can handle this. Jason, Dad? I tried again, but he interrupted me. Trust me, Dad, he said. I've got this under control. I wanted to argue, to tell him that this was too much for a 10-year-old, that it wasn't his job to protect us, but the look in his eyes stopped me. It wasn't the look of a frightened child. It was the look of someone who had already made a decision. That night, Jason disappeared into the garage again, locking the door behind him. I didn't have the energy to stop him. I didn't sleep, pacing the living room, Damien's threats echoing in my mind. Every creak of the house, every rustle outside made me jump. It wasn't until well after midnight that Jason finally emerged. He looked tired but satisfied, a small, almost triumphant smile playing on his lips. It's over, he said simply. What's over? I asked, a cold knot of dread tightening in my stomach. He held out his tablet and my heart sank as I read the screen. He had tracked Damien's location using some kind of GPS spoofing software. Not only that, but he had also hacked into Damien's burner phone, recording every threatening message he had sent. And to top it all off, Jason had sent an anonymous tip to the authorities with all the evidence they needed to arrest Damien. Jason, I said, my voice a mixture of awe and disbelief, do you even realize what you've done? I stopped him, he stated matter-of-factly. He can't hurt us anymore. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that this was the end, that Damien would be caught and we would finally be safe. But deep down, I knew that people like Damien didn't give up that easily. And sure enough, the next morning, I woke to the sound of shattering glass. A brick had been thrown through our living room window. Attached to it was a note, scrawled in jagged, angry handwriting. This isn't over. Jason found it before I did. He read it, crumpled it up, and tossed it in the trash without a word. Jason, I said cautiously, maybe we should leave? Go somewhere safe until this blows over? He looked up at me. His expression was calm, unwavering. We don't need to run, Dad. I have one more move. I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. What do you mean, one more move? He smiled. A small, chilling smile that sent a fresh wave of dread washing over me. You'll see. I couldn't shake the disquiet that settled over me at Jason's words. You'll see. He had said it so casually, so confidently, as if the chaos that had engulfed our lives was merely a game he was determined to win. But this wasn't a game, not for me. Not after spending the night sweeping up shards of glass and taping cardboard over the broken window, wondering if Damien's next visit would involve something more lethal than a brick. The next 2 days passed in a tense quiet. Jason went about his business as if nothing was amiss, but I could see the wheels turning in his young mind. I didn't dare ask what he was planning. Part of me didn't want to know. I figured if I remained ignorant, maybe, just maybe, I could pretend that my 10-year-old son wasn't orchestrating a battle against a grown man with nothing left to lose. And then it happened. It was late evening when the doorbell rang. A cold dread clenched my insides. No one had come to the door since the brick incident days ago, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Jason looked up from his tablet, his face unreadable. Don't open it, I said instinctively, my voice a low whisper. Jason didn't reply. He simply stood up, walked to the door, and peered through the peephole. Then, without hesitation, he unlocked the deadbolt and swung the door open. Standing on our doorstep was Damien, larger than life and twice as menacing. His face was contorted with rage, his eyes bloodshot and wild. He was a shadow of the smug, self-assured man I had seen in old photos with Laura. This Damien looked desperate and dangerous. "Where is he?" Damien snarled, stepping into the doorway uninvited. I tried to block his path, my heart hammering against my ribs. "You need to leave," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Damien sneered. "Oh, I'm not going anywhere. Not until your little brat explains how he ruined my life." To my horror, Jason stepped forward. He was calm, almost bored, crossing his arms over his chest as he fixed Damien with a steady gaze. "You did this to yourself," Jason said evenly. Damien's jaw clenched. "Listen here, you little—" "You're broke." Jason cut him off, his voice sharp and cutting. "You're wanted in 3 states, and now you're here, threatening me and my dad. Smart move." I reached for Jason, intending to pull him back, but he shrugged off my hand. "Jason, stop!" I hissed. But Jason didn't falter. He took another step closer to Damien, his voice remaining level and cold. "You shouldn't have come here. You're only making things worse for yourself." Damien let out a barking laugh. "Worse, kid. I've got nothing left to lose." "That's where you're wrong," Jason said, a small, chilling smile playing on his lips. Before I could fully process what was happening, Jason reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, something unfamiliar. He pressed a button and suddenly Damien's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. Damien frowned, pulling it out to see a flurry of files popping up on the screen, one after another. "What the hell is this?" Damien demanded. "Evidence," Jason said simply. Damien's eyes darted across the screen, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "You little—" "Evidence that you're a threat," Jason continued, cutting him off again. "Every message you sent, every call you made, every threat you uttered, you left a trail, and now the authorities have it." Damien's face flushed crimson. "You're bluffing." Jason tilted his head. "Am I?" It was then that the full scope of what Jason had done hit me. He hadn't just been gathering evidence. He had been setting a trap. Damien's phone wasn't just buzzing with files. It was live streaming everything to the local police department. Jason had turned Damien's own threats into his undoing. Damien lunged forward, his face contorted with rage, but before he could take another step, the air outside filled with the wail of sirens. Jason didn't even flinch. "That's for you," he said calmly. Damien froze, his eyes flicking to the window. The flashing blue and red lights confirmed it. He turned back to Jason, his face a mask of fury and panic. "This isn't over," he spat. "Yes, it is," Jason replied, his voice cold and final. Moments later, the door burst open and police officers swarmed in, guns drawn. Damien didn't resist. He knew it was over. As they led him away, I stood there, numb, trying to comprehend the whirlwind of events. Jason turned to me, his expression unreadable. "I told you I had one more move," he said quietly. "Jason," I said, my voice trembling, "do you even realize how dangerous that was? He could have hurt you. He could have hurt both of us." "But he didn't," Jason stated matter-of-factly. "And now he's gone." I wanted to yell at him, to demand answers, to make him understand that this wasn't normal, that this wasn't right. But all I could do was stand there and stare at the boy who had just outsmarted a grown criminal. Jason looked up at me, his gaze steady but weary. "It's over now, Dad. We're safe." But standing there, watching the police car disappear down the street, I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing about this felt safe at all. The house was eerily quiet after Damien's arrest. The chaos, the threats, the lurking fear, it all seemed to dissipate in an instant. But the silence wasn't comforting. It was heavy, suffocating, and filled with unspoken questions. Questions I wasn't sure I wanted the answers to. I had thought that was the end of it. Damien was out of our lives, Jason seemed to slip back into his usual routine, and I could finally focus on piecing together what little remained of our family. But then Laura called again. I recognized the number immediately. I had blocked her main line, but she must have found another way to reach me. For a moment I considered not answering. What more could she possibly say? But a morbid curiosity, a need to hear it for myself, compelled me. "What now, Laura?" I said. my tone colder than ice. Her voice was barely recognizable, weak and raspy, like someone who hadn't slept in days. "Alex," she began, but the word caught in her throat. "I don't have time for your sob stories," I cut in sharply. "If you're calling to ask for money or forgiveness, you're wasting your breath." "I don't want your money," she said softly. I don't know what I want." That took me aback. For the first time since this nightmare began, there was no defiance, no self-pity in her tone, just raw, unadulterated defeat. "Then why are you calling?" I demanded. "I'm in trouble, Alex," she confessed. "Real trouble." "You don't say," I replied sarcastically. She ignored my jab. "The police, they're investigating me. They think I was part of Damien's scams." "Well, were you?" I asked, letting the accusation hang in the air. She hesitated. "I didn't know what he was doing at first," she said, her voice trembling. "But by the time I realized, it was too late. I was already tangled up in it all. And now they're freezing my accounts, seizing my assets. I have nothing, Alex, nothing." "Join the club," I snapped. "Or have you forgotten that you drained Jason's college fund to finance your little adventure?" "I was stupid," she admitted, her voice breaking. I thought Damien loved me. I thought he would take care of me." I let out a bitter laugh. "And how's that working out for you?" She didn't answer. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "Why are you calling me, Laura?" I asked again, this time softer, though no less firm. "Because you're all I have left," she said quietly. "You and Jason." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, not because they moved me, not in the slightest, but because of how delusional they were. "You don't have us," I said flatly. "You lost us the moment you chose Damien over your family." "Alex, please," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I made a mistake. I know I messed up. But I'm still Jason's mother. I need a second chance." "A second chance?" I scoffed. "Laura, this isn't some minor slip-up. You stole from your own child. You abandoned him for a man you barely knew. And now that your perfect little fantasy has crumbled, you want to come crawling back? No, absolutely not." Her sobs filled the line, but I didn't waver. I couldn't. "Alex, I have nowhere else to go," she said, desperation seeping into every word. "That's not my problem," I replied coldly. "What about Jason?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Doesn't he deserve to have his mother in his life?" "Jason doesn't need you," I said bluntly. "He's done more for this family in the last 2 weeks than you ever did, and he did it without you. We don't need you, Laura, not anymore." For a moment, the line went silent. I thought she had hung up, but then she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "So that's it then?" she asked. "You're just going to turn your back on me?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You turned your back on us first, and now you're reaping what you sowed." She didn't reply. I could hear her ragged, uneven breathing, and then the line went dead. When I turned around, Jason was standing in the doorway, watching me with that same calm, unwavering expression he always wore. "That was Mom?" he asked. I nodded. "What did she want?" "To come back," I said simply. Jason didn't even flinch. "You told her no?" "I did," I nodded, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. "Good, she doesn't deserve to come back." I wanted to tell him that it wasn't that simple, that forgiveness had to be a part of the process, but looking at him, so composed, so resolute, I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Maybe he was right. Maybe some things were truly unforgivable. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop replaying everything Jason had done, everything he had orchestrated. It was impossible not to be awestruck by his brilliance. A 10-year-old had managed to outwit adults, dismantle a criminal enterprise, and save his family from financial ruin, all while maintaining an unsettling level of composure. It was impressive, undeniably, but it was also terrifying. Jason didn't behave like a normal child. He didn't react to situations with fear or hesitation. Instead, he calculated, strategized, and acted with precision. Every decision seemed to be part of a larger chess game that only he could see. And while I couldn't deny the effectiveness of his actions, I couldn't ignore the coldness that lay beneath. One evening, as I sat on the sofa staring at the cardboard covering the broken window, Jason walked into the room. He wore the same calm, self-assured expression he always did, but there was something different in his eyes, something heavier. "Dad," he said, sitting down beside me, "are you mad at me?" The question caught me off guard. "Mad at you? For what?" "For everything I did," he said simply. "For going after Mom and Damien, for not telling you." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Where do I even begin with that, Jason?" I said carefully. "What you did, a 10-year-old should never have to do any of that. Nobody should." "But I did," he said, his tone unwavering. "And it worked." "Yes, it worked," I conceded. "But it's not just about whether it worked or not, Jason. It's about what it means." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, searching for the right words. "Jason, the way you handled things, it wasn't normal. It wasn't healthy. You shouldn't have to think like that, to act like that. You're just a kid." His expression didn't change. "I did what I had to do. If I hadn't, who would have stopped them?" "Stopped them?" I wanted to argue, to tell him that it wasn't his responsibility, that I should have handled it. But deep down, I knew he was right. I had been paralyzed by anger and grief, too consumed by my own pain to act. Jason had stepped in because I couldn't, and that realization stung more than anything else. "You're brilliant, Jason," I said after a long pause. "Brilliant in ways I'll never understand, but you're also my son, and it's my job to protect you, not the other way around." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "But what if you can't?" he asked quietly. "What if it has to be me?" I had no answer for that. How could I, when the evidence was staring me right in the face? Jason had protected us. He had saved us. But at what cost? In the weeks that followed, life slowly began to settle back into a semblance of normalcy, or at least as normal as it could be. Damien was behind bars and Laura remained silent, likely too consumed by her own legal battles to bother us. The house was quiet, even peaceful. But it was a fragile peace, like a thin sheet of glass, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. One afternoon, I found Jason in the garage, tinkering away at a new project. It was a drone, sleek and meticulously assembled, wires and circuits arranged with perfect precision. He looked up when I entered, a small, almost shy smile gracing his lips. "Hey, Dad," he said. "What's up?" I leaned against the doorframe, watching him work. "You're always building something, aren't you?" He shrugged. "I like it. It keeps my mind busy." "That's good," I said carefully. "But Jason, you don't always have to fix everything. Sometimes it's okay to just let things be." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he focused on soldering a tiny wire, his hands steady and precise. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "I don't know how to do that." "What do you mean?" He put down the soldering iron and looked at me, his expression serious. "I don't know how to just let things be. If something's broken, I have to fix it. If there's a problem, I have to solve it. That's just how my brain works." I wanted to tell him that he didn't have to carry that burden, that it wasn't his responsibility to fix everything, but I knew it would be futile. Jason wasn't like other kids. He saw the world differently, and no amount of reassurance from me would change that. "You have a gift, Jason," I said finally, "but it's also a responsibility. You'll have to learn how to use it and who to trust with it." He nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "I know." I watched him for a few more moments, a mixture of pride and unease churning in my chest. Jason was brilliant. There was no denying that. But brilliance could be a double-edged sword. It could build or destroy, heal or harm, and all I could do was hope that as he grew older he would choose to build. That night, lying in bed, I thought about Laura's last words. "You've raised a son who doesn't just survive, Alex. He conquers, but be careful. One day his heart might become too cold to save." I didn't want to believe her, but the thought lingered. Jason was more than just a survivor. He was a force, and while I was proud of him, I couldn't shake the fear that his untamed brilliance might one day lead him down a path I couldn't follow. But for now, we had peace, and I was determined to protect it for both our sakes.